For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Hong Kong down 2%, a bit of a down day really for the Asia Pacific markets. Continuing business as far as the United States is concerned, the debt ceiling that is not being solved right now, and that's again something that I'll give you some slightly fuller details on slightly later on in my report. Mainland China down 2. China's Lenovo, though, the world's biggest PC manufacturer, is actually shrugging off the slowdown in the industry. It's saying that it expects growth to start in 2023. That's according to the CFO. And despite the tech sector crackdown and the rest of it in China, they're hoping that their business will survive. We're still mystified about many people are asking questions about the precise nature of the crackdown in China, which, again, we've got no details of at the moment. We're also staying with China, and to look at their Tesla rival XPeng, which has seen shares fall 11%. Forecast for car deliveries a little down, decreasing about 39%. That's a lot for them. They expect it to pick up, but they are experiencing rising competition from Tesla, and that's really not helping them a lot. And also, China's mixed recovery as far as its economy is concerned. People actually not buying cars at the moment. Singapore GDP growth, quite good. Official figures 0.4%. However, if you look beyond those, you find a lot of tourists are returning to the country. Official growth will be somewhere between 0.3 and 2.5% this year. I appreciate that's a big bandwidth, but that's what the authorities are actually saying. But nevertheless, it looks like the economy is doing reasonably well as tourists return to Singapore. Let me now turn to the United States, as promised, and the debt ceiling talks. No discussions expected over the weekend. All I can say is that the Republicans have told Joe Biden, we will not raise taxes. That's according to Kevin McCarthy, at least. The Fitch rating for the United States now has gone from AAA to, and I quote this, rating watch negative, i.e. they think the ratings may fall from AAA. Although nothing has been decided yet, but that's how the ratings agencies are looking at it at the moment. Nvidia, if you remember, they were in the news a couple of days ago. Their shares up 26% overnight. Their Jensen Huang, their CEO, whom we talked about the day before yesterday, sees big growth in what he described as the data-centric products, and expects an $11 billion increase and 50% higher than Wall Street has expected as well. So doing extremely well as far as the company itself is concerned. The EU, now, an interesting meeting between one of their EC commissioners, Thierry Breton, and the Alphabet CEO, Sundar Pichai. Now, we've talked about the guardrails as far as AI are concerned. AI and the EU have agreed to go forward with AI, but with strict regulations. Again, it's rather beating the regulators' brains as to how to do this. But both those big organisations, Google and the EU, or the European Commission, perhaps more strictly speaking, that the regulators are showing their concerns and are determining to do something about it. The EU is also planning to return some 196 billion euros to the Ukraine economy from Russian assets. Now, this is not expropriating Russian assets. This is taking the interest on them and returning it to Ukraine. So it stops short of actually expropriating the assets. And I think this is quite an important move. UK crypto concerns rising again in the UK. 40% of all UK fraud has been caused by I mean, gamblers, investors, what do you call them? Players, perhaps, getting in on the market. And the largest amount of that was during that period in November when FTX collapsed. So draw your own conclusions from that. You saw the headline rate of inflation fall in the UK from 10.1% to 8.7%. It does not include core inflation, and you're looking at Lidl. This is one of the cheaper price supermarkets. They've awarded their workers between 12 and 13% pay increase. Not an enormous amount, but it actually it brings big concerns about the wage price spiral, which is something that those inflation figures do not cover, nor do they cover food prices. The UK Labour Party, which it seems set fair now to, or they think at least set fair to win the next general election, is apparently going to tackle immigration by removing the ability. I didn't know this, but this is something actually quite interesting. That the UK employers can pay migrant workers 80% of salaries rather than 100%, and the Labour Party is going to remove that loophole away. The regulator, as far as energy is concerned, again, that was a big part of the fall in inflation, has put a new cap this morning on energy prices, and that's going to help about £426 on the average bill. So there'll be £426 less on the average bill. That's seen as part of the falling inflation picture. But as you say, it's very artificial. It's only an index and it doesn't account for the cost of living. If you want to know, food inflation is about 19% in the UK right now. And some good news at last for the UK economy. We were hearing yesterday that the IMF has revised its opinion of it. A big battery factory, we think, is going to be, Tata is going to announce this fairly soon. They own Jaguar Land Rover, and that battery plant, which is essential for the development of electric vehicles, will be opening fairly soon, they hope, in Somerset, in Bridgewater in Somerset. And if you remember, it was only last week when Stellantis, which makes Vauxhall, Peugeot, Citroën and Fiat cars in this country, said it would move away unless it got an idea of the industrial strategy related to the car industry. So that's that. As far as commodities are concerned, oil, it started to get bullish again. There's seen a slight rise in demand. The market's relatively tight, those prices will rise. Gold, on the other hand, not getting towards its record levels, and it's overcome by more risk of Fed tightening. Whether we actually see that or not, the Fed minutes suggested that fewer of the Fed committee actually thought that interest rates would actually be kept on hold. The majority, or a lot of them, felt that that rates would rise in the United States. Again, all on a knife edge as usual. That's the global view.
All right. Real quickly, isn't it hypocrisy now by the big tech companies saying, yes, we have to do AI with regulations? Didn't they know that AI, once you develop it and once you start, is akin to another case of a Victor Frankenstein, that once it leaves the stable, never comes back again? So why the hypocrisy and the backtrack now? Because I see it as hypocrisy.
I don't think they're backtracking. I think they've been taken by surprise by the speed at which AI is being adopted, and that genie is not going back into the bottle, and so they've got to deal with it. And I mean, part of the discussions, as I understand them in Europe, not only about what regulations it can bring, but what about false news? What about false news coming out of the Ukraine war, for example? How do we know what real news is? I keep banging on about this. The only answer to this question is not regulations, it's education. It's educating people to have the correct way of being able to see whether news is predominantly false or whether it actually has some substance to it. That, I think, is the biggest threat from AI. I mean, yeah, we can talk about it, composing Shakespeare and all that, but that, to me, that's the big one. False news, false ideas about what's going on in the world, created by artificial generative intelligence.
All right. Let's talk about countries cashing in on sanctions on Russia. A report in Reuters just talked about the fact that the UAE is cashing in on Russian gold due to the fact that their usual exports in terms of other countries have put sanctions on them, and therefore countries like the UAE, Turkey, China, who are still trading with Russia, are able to get Russian gold at a 1% discount benchmarked on global prices. Can you shed a bit more light on that? Are you aware of that? Do you have information on that in terms of countries that are benefiting indirectly or directly from sanctions?
If that story came across my news desk, I'd be saying, so where's the detail of this? I mean, it's pretty obvious that countries are able to trade, those that wish to, can trade with Russia's exports at a discount. We've already seen, haven't we? I think it was earlier this week that they were banned by the EU and by the UK and by the United States of Russian diamonds. And so, yeah, I mean, all this is, they may well be cashing in on it. I haven't seen the proof of that. Maybe this report's right, but the fact is, I'm not so much worried about that. I'm worried. I'm worried about Russia, and I'm worried about the influence of Russia, and therefore anything which makes it having to sell its assets more cheaply, I think, shows that the world still has control over its economy. I think that's where the question is. Maybe people are cashing in it. I don't know. I haven't. That would be my reaction to that story. So where's the proof?
Quickly, about inflation. Inflation figures announced yesterday in the UK indicated, it dropped to 8.7%. But at the same time, gilt yields have gone up. Is that a red flag or an amber flag? Because it seems that the Bank of England is now talking about further rate rises. Meanwhile, in the US, what's the worst case scenario with this debt ceiling brinkmanship? That is causing problems, in the stock market, in the futures, and even as far away as South Korea. That's one. Number two, Italy has a pasta crisis, the staple food. The prices have gone up by about 17.5%. In India, they are having a problem with milk. The cost of milk has gone up by about 100%. Here in Nigeria, let's even talk about food inflation in Nigeria. So is this, the deepening of the global food crisis that World Bank and IMF and others predicted?
Very possibly. Food inflation is high in most countries, and that unfortunately is a fact of life. And people in rich countries are going to have to spend more to buy less, if you like, and certainly the World Bank and the IMF need to reconsider what they're actually doing as far as the world food crisis is concerned. I note that on the good side of things, that apparently grain is now being reshipped from Ukraine. Those lanes are open again. But yeah, we certainly face a food crisis. I think also what we face is something which is a long way away from most people's thoughts about, is a water crisis. That's really where I think the next conflict. I think it's a long way away, but I think that's where that will actually come from.
Well, inflation in the UK.
Well, we talked about that yesterday. I mean, all I'd say about that is that it doesn't. It really, those figures are an indexation of what's going on. The real picture is the fact that most people are having to pay more for what they think they need, and that is the rise of the cost of living. As I said yesterday, there are a number of pressures. Food inflation is quite high, therefore people are paying a lot more. The wage price spiral is not going away, because we've seen that increase, 13% increase in little workers, and this is what the Bank of England, I don't feel has any control over it whatsoever. But I did talk about that at quite some length yesterday. I mean, if you want me to repeat it, I will. What I think they're a long way away of controlling that. They only have a very clumsy weapon. I don't know why they didn't see it rising more quickly, because they say they have agents all over the country who are looking at this. And I think central banks, I think there'll be a lot of reckoning of central banks, but not right now. I think it'll come after the present crisis is over.
Well, thank you very much, Michael.